A series of low groans and metallic twangs filled the air as everything around me felt like it slowed down. The blood on my hooves made it hard to grip the asphalt, while the world seemed to rotate away from me, stopping with a jolt that made me slide back. With all the strength I had left, I took my hoof around a jutting piece of rhubarb. It stopped my fall, but not that of the chunk of wire and steel that had somehow wrapped around my back leg. The fires from the battle, raging only a few feet away, whipped high into the cold night air, the smoke turning the grayish clouds to an ever deeper black. I looked up and prayed to Luna that my friends were all right. With a clenched jaw, I pulled hard on the rebar, sliding myself up the tilted highway slightly. It allowed me the briefest moment to view the ongoing battle. The Steel Rangers' guns poured fire into the two towers the raiders had holed up in, chipping away at the reinforced steel as fires blazed inside the upper levels of the complex. I smiled to myself as one of the hooded acolytes slipped one of the pink party rockets it had stolen into a launcher. He hoisted it up, and with a hiss, sent it square into the side of the makeshift bunker. When the smoke cleared, a balloon-shaped hole sat punched neatly into the side of it. At least I finally knew what it did. But why would the Ministry of Morale need to punch balloon-shaped holes in buildings? I guess I should know. Pinkie Pie is the answer to every Ministry of Morale question. The rebar let out a soft cry, bending slowly down. Right. Back to the fact that I was hanging off of the end of a slowly disintegrating bridge. The weight of the steel wrapped around my leg was getting to be too much for my hoof to hold. I winced as I could feel the wire cutting into my flesh. I spotted a red flash in the air, and for just a moment I could see her. The Pegasus mare I had grown to call my sister was streaking towards me. If anyone could save me, it was her. I relaxed a bit, thinking of something sarcastic to say when she was pulling me back to solid ground. Stop for coffee? Too cliché. Should I buy you a map? Nah, not obvious enough. Haha, I got it. As I opened my muzzle, the rebar slipped free and threw me over the edge of the roadway. I could do nothing but watch as she screamed out to me, the meaning lost as the bridge grew smaller. The gray of the sky was finally visible as what remained of the Buckland Bridge roadway tumbled along with me to the frigid water below. Closing my eyes, I listened as everything seemed so still. You know, they say that when you're going to die, your life flashes before your eyes. But as I slammed into the water below, and all sensation drifted away, I couldn't help but think that whoever told me that somehow lied to my face. So, before I continue with my story, I guess I should explain to you, whoever you are, who I am, and why my journey was one of just the handful in my time that helped me shape the wasteland. Let this be the record of my deeds, for better or worse. If you were to understand my story, you need to understand a bit about me. My name is Backlash. I was born 95 years after the Great War as an earth pony from the Hoofington area. I grew up in a small settlement near what was once the front lines of the Great War. My mother, brother, and I lived in a small one-room shack on the edge of town. Like most who lived there in our community, we scavenged what we could from the decaying corpse of the old world. My father supposedly died before I was born, so it was just my brother and I taking care of our mother. When I was growing up, the raiders and slavers in our area were just coming out of the various gangs scattered amongst the wastes. They mostly avoided towns with nothing useful to offer, but always ran through once or twice a month to prove their might. When my brother left to seek glory in one of the gangs that roamed our lonely corner of the wastes, we lost half our salvage earnings. Mom considered moving us back to the rock farm her family came from, but we didn't have the caps to hire anyone to protect us. and she didn't want to lose me along the dangerous journey. So we stayed, getting by with whatever we could scrape together. After that, I got my cutie mark. Things picked up. I could take the more dangerous salvage jobs in the minefields. It was extremely dangerous work, but it paid enough that I could get us out of that town. We journeyed by wagon with a trader and his bodyguards, up into the interior of Equestria. We were ambushed several times, and lost one of the bodyguards outright during one of the fights. The other sadly died from an infected wound a few days later. It wasn't until the day after the second guard's death that we came across her. She'd fallen like a bolt out of the sky, splashing down in a small lake near the trail we were on. Instinctively, I'd run to grab her, feeling like one of those heroes in all the stories I had ever read in the comics that we scavenged. The brave stallion, heroically saving the damsel in distress. Clumsily carrying her on my back, I'd barely made it back to shore with her before a radiator came charging out after us. My legs folded under me, and as I was racked with fear, but before I could call out, my mother leapt onto it with one of the dead guard's machetes. She screamed for us to run, and I did just that. With the Pegasi mare on my back, and the cart bouncing behind the trader, we galloped for what felt like hours. We'd set up camp at the rock farm that night to wait for her, but she never showed up. The trader suggested that she most likely died protecting us, and that she was a good mare to have done that. I couldn't do anything but be torn by the thought that she was just gone, because I foolishly ran into a dangerous situation without thinking of what might happen. Stricken with grief and no real connection to the rock farm, I made the decision to ride with a trader to Manhattan to seek help for the injured Pegasus mare. As she recovered, I learned a lot about the mare who fell from the sky. It turns out, Skyline came from somewhere over the border in Caledonia. She'd been injured running from her past, because her parents were Dashites, and the Enclave wanted her branded a traitor. She had left them at their request. They wanted her to attempt to find a normal life elsewhere, and she'd flown for 2 days before exhaustion dumped her in front of us. Funny enough, I think the Enclave figured they had killed her, because they never came looking again. So both of us, parentless and poor, decided to work for the trader. He, for some reason, never told us his name, only saying it didn't feel right, and that it would be easier on us if something happened to him. So we just got around to calling him Old Man. We worked with him on a few of his trips, but he quickly saw my talents for bartering and put me to work with my own wagon. Selling wares on his behalf was something I'd turned out to be half decent at, but it was only half of the equation for success. As it turned out, Skyline was a damn fine shot with pretty much anything that fits on a battle saddle, and traveling with me as a bodyguard. We made an unstoppable team. After a few years, the old man fell ill and died. Before he went, Celestia rest his soul, he said we had inherited his business in his building in the Manhattan outskirts. The Sunshine Garage was a bland-looking 3-story red brick building, a building only about 20 feet wide, although marginally deeper. It was flanked on the sides and rear by the rubble of a few other collapsed buildings, making it look quite imposing, almost like a fort. And that is, unless you count the open-air 3rd floor. Skyline just used that as a landing pad, so it worked out well for the both of us. The plane looked not only helped discourage the scavengers from peeking in, but also kept the random raiders from thinking it was occupied. Along with our home, the trader had left me a little something that I'd been working on for the past year inside the garage. The peeling yellow paint looked off in the evening light as it streamed through the open garage door. The odd assortment of boxes, shelves, and random piles of scrap metal cast intricate shadows against the back wall. While nice if the evening light was your thing, mostly it screwed up my vision. Even without the light, the inside, the engine compartment, of the large four-wheeled vehicle that occupied most of the space on the first floor was hard to see. I had read through the owner's manual so many times that I'd memorized it. The Chrysalis Motor Company was one of the pioneers of the spark battery-powered vehicle. They were apparently absurdly expensive, but the Chrysalis Company promised that for the money, they would turn into anything you'd like. Sports cars, recreational vehicles, and even a camper van were offered as choices in the stained and yellow pages of the pre-war booklet. The spots of rustling red offset the once black bodywork of the pre-war muscle car marvel. The only chrome left intact at all was the lettering that spelled out the model. The car was in surprisingly good condition for being left here until the old man found the place, which reminded me of another thing written in the advertisement. The more you love your car, the longer it lasts. I said out loud, as I imagined it being like a catchy little pre-war jingle. With a sad sigh, I remembered how the Chrysalis company went under when the Sky car came out. Lost in thought, I'd misjudged my depth and dropped the wrench I was using into the dark compartment. I leaned forward, reaching past the engine and wiggling my hoof around near the transmission. With a strained whine, I tightly grabbed the wrench that had slipped from my fetlock. The radio in the car had been blaring at the same old pre-war tunes that they'd always played. But what I really wanted to hear was the news. DJ Pwn 3 always had good info on where to find the best tech to trade. And, Celestia as my witness, I was going to be the richest damn trader when I got out of here. As soon as I'd fixed up the Marauder, that is. Hello there, Wasteland. It's me, your good old friend DJ Pwn 3. And guess what? It's news time. I froze, not wanting to miss a single ounce of juicy info. Come on, something good this time. To all you wondering the situation about in Ponyville, you can relax. The slave traders have left the settlement under Sheriff Easthoof, took the help of a few of the angry townsfolk, and literally threw them out. With those goons out of the picture, the 28 they had in their care have been freed and are now recovering. To the slavers now out on your flanks, I only have this to say to you. Good riddance. Okay, that wasn't anything special. The wasteland sucks. I got that. But we all have to live here. Who cared how you made a couple of caps? Raiders and slavers were just part of life. As common as rocks were in the wastes. Plus, the slavers only sold criminals and such, so they were a way of fixing some of the lawlessness. I tried not to think about it too much, as intellectual thinking had never been something I was good at. And great news for those of us who live in the Manhattan area. My ears perked up with that. Yes! I whispered under my own breath. I needed a good tip. Anything to get started. As I thought, I clenched the wrench tighter in anticipation, leaning towards the speaker slowly. A new pre-war... Electricity arced through the wrench as I hit the contact on the recessed spark battery starter. It sent painful stabs through my forehoof and filled my nose with the stench of charred fetlock. I pouted to myself as the room fell silent with the smell of singed fur filling the compartment to an almost unbearable level. I sighed and pulled the wrench out, throwing it lazily to the side of the garage before leaning back against to grab the now dead spark battery I had to replace. Most ponies would think I'm crazy to be repairing a 120-year-old beautiful crafted hunk of steel, saying it would be cheaper to just hire one of those weird two-headed cows. I have nothing against the Brahmin, but being nice folk and all, but they just aren't the same. Ponies don't get it. Not only does the Marauder go up to 110 miles an hour, it's got a huge trunk for storing my trade goods. If that weren't enough, it can also seat 7 ponies. 7! I mean, back before the war, the Sky Car was all the rage, but... Backlash! An excited Mara's voice came out of nowhere from behind me. I screamed and jumped from the sudden voice. But, with a thunk, I slammed my head on the raised hood. It creaked as the block of wood holding it fell off, and it dropped down on top of me quite painfully. "Oh, Celestia, are you all right?" The mare's voice gave a little giggle as she came over and helped me prop the hood up again. She was a bit smaller than most other Pegasi that I had seen, which doesn't mean much since I've only seen like 2 others up close, really. But she had saved my ass countless times out in the waste. Her bright red coat seemed to bleed into the sunset of the horizon behind her. Her cutie mark was a thin black line with a gold half circle in the center on top, and a silver half circle on the bottom. But only her yellow and white striped mane brought her to the front of it all. Her shimmering gold eyes betrayed the fact that she was yet again worried about something. "What do you need, Skyline?" I shut the hood with a grunt, and gave it a good whack with my hoof, trying to forget the disappointment of missing the broadcast. "I'm damn close to getting this old gal working." "Are you?" She crossed her hooves in a huff. "You've been working so long on this piece of..." She caught at my glare and nearly stuttered, but to her credit, it wouldn't have been noticeable by other ponies. "What I meant to do was ask why we didn't just get a sky cart. It'd be much faster if we can fly over..." I put my hoof up and shook my head. "And what happens if you get hurt? We'd lose the business. Before you know it, we'd be back in paradise, looking for work from those new goody foreshoes, dragging water all over the place. No scavenging or anything." I shudder just thinking about it. "Besides, if one of us was injured, the other can still drive." She stretched her wings out with a frown as she looked at the rust-laden vehicle. "Yeah, I'll never get in that thing, even if you ever do get this junk running. I need to fly." Well, I'd hoped she'd changed her mind if it were to save my life. Though, I thought, with a small sigh. Rolling my eyes, I'd packed up my tools into their respective places. "I keep telling you, Earth Pony. You know, like hooves. Say, on the ground." I stomped my hooves with each word to emphasize, before turning to grab a spark battery out of the box of spares. "Anyway, you wanted something badly enough that you snuck up on me?" She just stood there for a moment, shifting her eyes wildly around the room. I watched as she scrunched up her muzzle in nervous hesitation. It was odd. I hadn't seen her like this before. "So, our application for a storefront in Ten Pony Tower has been received and reviewed." I beamed the widest smile I'd ever given her, squeezing her cheeks, nearly bowling her over as I pressed up against her face. "Oh my gosh!" I spoke so fast, all the world seemed to blend into one. "Did they say yes?" My hooves shook with anticipation. She nodded slowly, giving me an obviously nervous grin, which of course I didn't pay attention to. My brain was too busy processing the fact that we had just gotten a store inside the hub of Manhattan trade. Our own store. More so, at the hardest place in the waste to get a hoof into. No more bulk pawning outside the gates. We're going to make so many caps. I can only imagine I'd been salivating all over the floor when she poked at my chest sharply. "But," she continued while I froze. Celestia, how I hated that word. "We need to show them some way that we are better than any of the other applicants." She paused and rubbed at her chin. "And to be honest, I don't really know what sets us apart. How are we any better?" I tapped my hoof on the garage floor before jumping onto the Marauder's hood, posing myself dramatically as the last bit of our meager wasteland sunlight dropped below the horizon. We have this. We'd spent the rest of the night working on the car, and when I say we, I of course meant me. See, when I was a colt, I'd love to take things apart. I could see and hear the tiny parts of pre-war gizmos that others couldn't. I could regularly sneak out of our settlement to the old battlefields around Hoofington and find something to take home and tinker with. Sometimes I would find something completely useless and somehow make it work again. My eyes were growing heavy as the sun started to shine for a minute or so. It did on the horizon before the clouds cover drained all life from the day again. Skyline had gone to bed a few hours ago, and all I had to do was fit the spark battery controller into the mount in the engine compartment. Then I'd be good to go for tomorrow, today, or for later. With a click, it fit into its mounting. I gave it a quick shake to make sure it sat right, only shutting the hood when I was satisfied with my work. With the Marauder completed, I sat on the floor, yawning. Wobbly, I trotted over to the stiff mattress and flopped over onto it, ready for bed. Funny, this was that I didn't even remember hitting it before everything faded to black. With no cause to, I sat up suddenly. A cool breeze swirled around me, and I found myself somewhere I'd never seen before. I squinted at the sun as it climbed into the endless blue. Grassy knolls with a few trees seemed to sketch endlessly on towards the horizon. The tree next to me was blossoming pinkish-white flowers, and I could see a bird's nest resting in one of the lower branches. Then, from all around me, a beckoning voice called out softly on the wind, "Follow the breeze." I got to my hooves and trotted happily towards it, taking in the warmth of the sun as the breeze guided me. It felt surprisingly good to have the grass under my hooves, although I wasn't really sure why. I'd pondered this while climbing yet another knoll. Looking over the side, I had froze. Stuck out of the ground on the other side was a rusted hulk of an artillery piece. It looked almost like one that I'd found as a colt. Moss had grown over it, and a single daisy grew at the top of the barrel. I trotted over and looked at it closely. I could clearly see each point where I had fixed it. It was definitely the same cannon from when I was young, but why was it here? Without warning, the gun fired. A bright contrail of rainbow flew towards the horizon and disappeared with a flash. The wind kicked up as the voice in the wind told me one final thing. Find the key. I woke from my slumber with a jolt. I was back in the garage and staring up wide-eyed into skylines. For some reason, she was floating over my head and stifling a laugh. Good dream? She was beginning to crack, giggling longer and louder as I sat there with a confused look on my face. Then I felt it. The cold air on my... Yeah. She burst out, laughing. Whoa, I didn't know you could turn that shade of red. She collapsed onto the floor, gasping in between each laugh. I got to my hooves and stormed off upstairs. Being around each other for so long, things like this weren't embarrassing anymore. I'd seen her go through her heats, and she'd seen me pent up. We just needed something siblings dealt with when growing up together. While it wasn't anything new for her to see, it didn't make me feel any less awkward to have my sister scoping out the goods. The second floor of our humble home was little more than a kitchen and attached bathroom. Skyline didn't like sleeping on the ground floor, or in the rain on the third floor, so she had her bed up there tucked into a corner in the kitchen. The single bathroom we had wasn't big, but it had all the amenities, including heated running water. It was a bitch to set up, but it was so worth the effort. I went to the tub and turned on the shower, letting the lukewarm water run over me as I tried to remember what the breeze had said in my dreams. Follow the key? After a couple of minutes on it, I turned off the shower and shook my coat. Looking into the mirror, I could see my tan hide had healed up over the last week. Minor bruises and scrapes are no laughing matter without healing potions and being miles away from the nearest settlement. The gold half of my brown mane was also recovering from the pilot accident last month, though I wish I could have lost the extra bit of weight I carried around my elsewhere. I wasn't overweight, just husky. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Content all of me was where it was supposed to be, I trotted out and put yesterday's dishes into the sink. I opened the fridge and pulled out a sparkle cola, tapping the cap against the counter to pop it off into the bin of caps we kept on the floor. We put the rest in our safe in the basement whenever we got a good amount of them, just in case you're wondering. The carroty taste was always a good pick-me-up in the morning, and it immediately took my mind off of Skyline's normal antics. It also reminded me of our to-do list for the week, which was really the same as every week. Grab our gear, head out to some faraway place, scavenge along the way, trade our goods there, scavenge on the way back, pawn our stuff to Tenpony, and then head home. Tenpony, I muttered, right before I'd thrown the now empty bottle into the trash. With a vigor I'd hardly believed myself to have, I'd bolted down the stairs and slammed into a very surprised Skyline. "We're going to be late!" She shoved me back to my hooves and dusted herself off. Hastily, I jumped into the Marauder through the windowless door and flopped along the seat to get myself reoriented. With quick jabs at the big red engine start button, I impatiently waited for the whine of the main starter capacitor. Nothing. "Damn it! Why don't you start? I've fixed everything!" I thumped my head against the steering wheel. Of all days! Celestia, why today? Skyline tapped my shoulder with a sly grin and trotted to the front end of the car. I cringed as she reared up and brucked the front fender, the old metal giving a sharp squelch at the hit. The capacitor whined to life, right before the roar of the engine drowned it out. I probably could have picked my jaw up with a shovel as she sauntered over to the window and leaned in. "She's stubborn, just like you. Just need a good buck every now and again." She smiled and pulled her goggles down. "Now, show me what makes this bucket any better than my old cart." I grinned and nodded. "First one to Tenpony?" "You're on." She flashed a smile and burst into a gallop, immediately taking off into the air when she cleared the garage. I punched the Marauder into drive and took off after her. I grumbled as I pulled up in front of the large pre-war skyscraper. Skyline was waving triumphantly from inside the second-floor window as she drank something. I could only guess it was wild Pegasus, as it was something she'd only drank when she won a bet. One of those days, she'll have to show me how she got through security so damn quickly. I turned the car off as a unicorn mare who seemed too clean for wasteland life stepped up to it. The lime green pony seemed to eye the car in disgust as she wrote something down on her clipboard. "I'm afraid you won't be able to keep that ugly thing here while doing business at the tower. They have a terrible habit of exploding." She didn't sound particularly friendly, though the townfolk never were. Still, I was shocked. I'd spent the last year fixing her up just to have her demeaned. I mean, yeah, she could have used a new coat of paint, but that was uncalled for. Before I could object, she continued in a voice that nearly sounded to me like she believed herself to be dying of boredom. Since you're the only applicant of the 3 to show up, I guess you may have the position. She floated the clipboard over and explained that I would need to put up a 500 cap non-refundable deposit to the shops by the month's end, and blah blah blah. Sign here, here, and here. I hastily scrawled out my signature and pushed the clipboard away. She looked it over for a good minute, which made me fidget uncomfortably as I thought about how I probably screwed something up and fucked this whole chance straight to Tartarus. Well, everything seems to be in order. Welcome to Ten Pony Tower, Mr. Backlash. She turned to walk away, stopping and eyeing over me. I was surprised to see you show up at all. I thought you'd be off to raid that bunker they found near the Ministry of Morale hub. Well, their loss is your gain. She turned and disappeared through the front doors of the tower. A whole bunker? Of pre-war tech? Thank you, Celestia! I started the engine and spun the tires, taking off towards the hub at high speed. The gear in my head formulated all the goods that could have been stocked there. The bunkers always had high-end tech, which normally gave us scavengers a small window until those power-armored assholes showed up. If I was lucky, the other teams were on foot. It could take hours to get there, while I could be there in 10 minutes. A soft voice in my head sprang up, nudging to wait for Skyline, although I couldn't hear it over the thoughts of the clinking caps and all the fame I would earn. After nearly 15 minutes of navigating the rubble-strewn streets, I pulled up to the front of the imposing Ministry of Morale hub. I was a bit distressed to find a group already there. Just standing outside, across the street from me, they all seemed quite amazed at my ride, though, which instantly brought a prideful smile across my face. Sorry, she's not for sale. I beamed at them. She was my vehicle, and I was going to drive her. With a collective grumble, they turned back to what looked like a storm cellar, with 2 burnt and twisted heavy steel slabs splayed out in front of it. They looked like they used to cover it, but something big had flung them off to the sidewalk next to it. Trotting over, I looked down with the others. It was a narrow stairwell that went down 10 feet or so before ending in a pink force field. Oh, and between the stairs and the pink stood a pony in power armor. If that already hadn't been bad news, a minigun and anti-machine rifle stuck off the sides of silver powery armor. The Steel Ranger's crest was prominently emblazed where his or her cutie mark would be, and the dark eyes of the steel battle helmet made the armored pony's gaze seem cold. What do we have here? I started to ask slowly. And why? He cut me off mid-sentence, and was trying a bit hard to sound imposing. This bunker is property of the Steel Rangers, under the authority of the Ministry of Wartime Technologies. Any attempt to take it will be deemed hostile, and you will be fired upon. At this, the other scavengers took a step back. The 2 in the back walked off in a huff, muttering to themselves how it wasn't worth it. Can I ask you a question, then? I eyed him over suspiciously. No, he replied with a stern hoof stomp. Yeah, I didn't quite hear that. I squinted and sat down, rubbing my chin with a hoof. I'd listened to how this stallion spoke, and while he didn't seem like he was bluffing, I wasn't sure he couldn't be bargained with. Why don't you just take the bunker? A loud sigh emanated from the speaker on the helmet. I put my hoofs together and frowned. I mean, why guard if the shield keeps people out? Because one of you fools could disintegrate yourselves on it. His voice boomed through his helmet. I could see him tensing up as he lined his anti-machine rifle with my grinning face. Now, I suggest you leave before I have to hurt you instead. His armor winced for a moment at the end of his threat. He was frustrated and he either didn't want to be here, or he didn't want to hurt me. Perfect. Fine. I'll just get in my perfectly working chrysalis car and head home. A shame I couldn't just get one teensy look at the bunker before I left. I gave him my best, terminally sad impression before slowly turning around. Okay, kid. Totally got him. Hook, line, and sinker. Here's the deal. You can look at the bunker shield, but if you get yourself killed, I get your car. I spun around in an instant, grabbing his steel hoof and shaking it quickly. It's a deal. Just a quick peek is all, Mr. I'm Paladin Brass Tacks. Now, go quickly, before I change my mind. He pulled his hoof back sharply, the black eye socket staring lifelessly back as he did his best to step aside in the narrow corridor. I smiled as I attempted to squeeze past him. I say attempted because I somehow caught my hoof on his tail armor. I stumbled forward sharply towards the shield, thinking how stupid I was to come here alone. Why did everything go so wrong so fast? I was about to be vaporized by a pink shield. Pink! I clenched my eyes shut, waiting for the searing pain. But what I found was that I slammed my face into the cement just beyond the barrier. Searing pain. No. Sharp stabbing pain. Yes. Oh, Celestia, did that hurt. I got to my hooves and brushed my face off, the blood from my nose smearing on my hoof while my vision cleared. Huh? That was... Ugh! The Steel Ranger's back legs connected with my side, bucking me entirely through the shield. I slammed into a large metal door with a crack and collapsed on the ground. I laid there, gasping as the Steel Ranger simply peered at me. It seems you're related to one of the Ministry mayors, the Ranger stated with a voice so dull I could bludgeon him with it. How fortunate for you. What the fuck was that for? I shakily got up, but the pain in my side was nearly unbearable. With my teeth clenched, I started to hobble back towards the shield. Fuck! I think you broke something. Hold it. The barrel of his gun started to spin up. You must enter the bunker and shut down the shield. I groaned and pointed a hoof back at the door. I don't even know how to open a door. As I gasped, the pain drew sharper. It was hard to think, and my world had started to tilt and spin. I think I'm hurt real bad. I coughed and spit blood into the concrete, wobbling forward as my vision darkened. For the second time that day, I didn't remember hitting the ground. My eyes opened to meet the blue skies again, the sun hanging up on the center of the amazing blue void. Now that I had time to really look at it, I was shocked at how big it seemed. The gray cloud cover over Equestria seemed to be oppressively low sometimes. This seemed to just stretch on forever. Forever. Away. Okay. Now it looked deep. And now I feel sick. I spun over and threw up on the grass. On second thought, the low clouds were kind of nice. Wiping my muzzle with a hoof, I stood up and stopped to think about what just happened. How am I sick inside of a dream? I stared at the vial of fluid on my hoof. It looked real enough, and certainly smelled real enough. The breeze kicked up over my shoulder, bringing with it a light, giggling that seemed to trail off over the hills. With my stomach now calm, I slowly prodded my way over towards the laughter. As I crested the familiar hill, on the other side I saw a brightly colored table set up where the cannon should have been. An odd assortment of objects were set up in all the chairs except for the two end chairs. Bright balloons and frosted sweets were were strewn about on the table to give the impression of a party. Slowly approaching the table, I could make out the guests. A pile of rocks, a sack of flour, a bucket of turnips, and a pile of fluff? Each one wore a party hat, and had an assortment of half-eaten food laid out in front of it. If I died, and this is the afterlife, I scratched the back of my head softly, not sure what to make of it. "You didn't die!" A squeaky voice blared out from behind me. I jumped and spun to meet a pair of piercing blue eyes. A pink filly was standing up on the hill, sitting on her hoof tips as if to be at my height. She smiled and jumped over me, bouncing off my back to land on the table with a soft thump. "You're half dead, so this is almost afterlife. Half afterlife? Afterlife?" She scrunched her muzzle and looked deep in thought, her fizzy pink mane shifting in the wind. "Oh, and you are?" I walked to the table and sniffed the cake. With nothing but a sparkle cola in me, I was fairly hungry. I wanted to just have a bite, but I stopped myself when I remembered this is just a dream. "I'm your great auntie, Pinkie Pie." She squeaked and bounced around the table excitedly. "Have a seat and try the cake. It's delicious." I nudged back the nearest chair and sat in it. "So, you're Pinkie Pie? The same dead ministry mayor from all the posters I've seen about? And you say I'm somehow related to you?" I looked her over before crossing my hooves. "Not only does that seem improbable, but I thought you were older." She shook her head vigorously. "Not somehow related, directly." "But you said aunt," I began to slowly reply, but she cut me off. "Oh, it's simple, silly. Back before the war, I once accidentally made more me's that were useful, but during the war, I was under so much stress that I needed more me's, so I went back and got 'em. But there were many that had a few of them that had a bit more fun than I would have wanted. But that doesn't matter, because you're here." There was a sound of the missing cannon firing, and confetti rained down from seemingly nowhere. "So, that still doesn't explain how we're talking. You're dead." I brushed the confetti off my muzzle with a stern glare. "Of course I am, silly. But I'm also alive right now in your head. I mean, how else would we be talking? Duh!" She buried her face in the cake and started to eat noisily. "So, what do you want from me? What am I supposed to do?" I asked. This was the most confusing dream I had ever had, even with the cannon dream before. She looked up, wet pieces of cake plopping down onto the table from her face. "Get the key, of course. Didn't you listen before?" "But what about?" I tried to say before she cut me off again, this time shaking all the cake from her coat onto me. "The code is 42. Get it? 42. That's the answer." She bounced around the table again, squishing and flinging the rest of the cake everywhere before freezing stiff. "Oh, the party's over already?" She tilted her sad face towards the sky, tears welling up in her bright eyes, before she softly smiled back at me. "Luna says I have to be dead again, so goodbye." She bounced forward, smacking me directly in the face with all four of her hooves. With that, I fell back into painful darkness. Oh, Luna, that painful darkness. I screamed out to the black void, and it felt like an eternity before the pain subsided. Ever so slowly, I could hear something coming through it. Voices? Not voices. Music. Some sort of polka playing far off in the distance. "Doctor, he's regaining consciousness." Oh, I guess I did hear voices. "Wait outside, please," a voice said next to me. I struggled to open my eyes. The light from the ceiling was nearly blinding. I tried to reach up and cover myself from it, but I couldn't move. In fact, I couldn't move at all. I started to hyperventilate. I should mention I don't do well penned up. "Calm down there, Backlash." A familiar voice from in front of me. "You got totally banged up out there." A blue unicorn stallion in a white lab coat towered above me. I recognized him as Dr. Fitz. His full name was Giggle Fitz, but he didn't like ponies using it for some reason. He ran the 10-pony infirmary normally, and he was looking at a clipboard while he magically undid my bindings. I relaxed and sat up slowly. The rest of the world seemed a bit off-kilter, even when I stopped. Now, I'm not going to ask why a Steel Ranger brought you in, but you need to stop getting so damn busted up all the time. Sorry, Doc. Occupational hazard. I rubbed my wrists. How bad was I? He eyed his charts before looking over his black-rimmed glasses. Well, you broke 2 ribs, punctured a lung, bruised your liver and a kidney, and nearly stopped breathing from pulmonary edema. I looked down with a shameful smirk. Oh, is that all? He tossed the clipboard down onto the counter. I can't keep sparing all these supplies for your reckless adventures. What if somebody else needs the Med-X I'd given you, or the Hydra to fix the trauma? Hell, even the Radaway you keep neglecting to take would be useful instead of having to detox you all the time. I don't just like the orange flavor that much. I gave him a guilty smile and looked about nervously. He sighed and face-hoofed. I know you get most of the supplies for me, and you know I'll always fix you up. But for Celestia's sake, can you just try harder to get not so damn busted up? For a reliable of a supplier you are, you seem to have an awful lot of them. I smiled and hopped off the bed, wincing at the freshly healed wounds. And don't worry, Doc. I'm done with being grievously injured. I swear, I'm a chained stallion. You might not want to make promises you can't keep, he said, as he rinsed off his medical tools and floated another Med-X over. I held it in my hooves, looking confused. Trust me, you'll need it. 3 loud bangs on the door startled me. Backlash? You moron! Skyline's voice boomed through. How could you leave without me? I frowned and looked down at the syringe again. Oh, Celestia, how much was I going to need of this tonight? Level up. Speech plus 10. New perk. Long haul. Because of your mechanical aptitude, your Marauders' spark batteries last twice as long as normal, or last for normal time when overloaded to twice the weight. New quest perk. Equestrian royalty. Being related to a ministry mayor means that even your mere presence can unlock some of the secrets of Equestria, and everyone you meet sucks up to you for it. Speech and barter plus 10, and new dialogue options available.